All right, America. How have you been since Saturday when I did the stream related to the Fedsurrection hosted by Nancy Pelosi? Hopefully, you've been well. I'm going to go ahead and wait for a few folks to come in. As you come in, I wanted to go ahead and tell you what I'm about to talk about over the next, it's probably going to be an hour, maybe more, maybe less. But some of you have not been following me closely enough to know that I've given this presentation in the past in not as much detail. One time I gave it at the Health and Freedom and Constitution conference in Purcellville, Virginia, a few weeks ago. And then last week I gave a presentation before an Alexandria Republican women's group. Okay. But today I'm going to provide you a little bit more detail, hopefully. And I do want to start off with saying that I will be taking questions. And so go ahead and ask your questions and share if you care. So with that, let's kick things off. There you go. So let's start. And oh, by the way, I think this is, I got it set up so that it's streaming on Rumble, on Locals. I'm going to see if CommiTube will even allow this to go. Twitch and Fakebook. And then obviously on X. I think the better user experience is going to be over here on Rumble. Ivan Raiklin is the channel, or maybe just Raiklin. And then you can go ahead and take a look at the live stream, log in, and make your comments known. Okay. There we go. We get some folks in here. Appreciate it. So let's begin. I'm not sure if it'll be able to get on the full screen, but if it does, then all the better. So I'm going to be providing you quite a bit of research that I've conducted over the several years of treason conducted by our entire government, okay? So let's take a look here. I didn't get pardoned. What's going on here? Okay. Sorry about that background noise. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to be giving you a presentation on the last 11 years of treason, which pretty much covers all the different categories that are listed of members on the old deep state target list. And as a reminder, the deep state target list is the list of individuals that must be scrutinized with maximum authority. Particularly, it would be nice for Elon Musk to allow us to look into their direct messages for the entire history of their accounts. And then number two, it'd be nice for Dana White to go ahead and do the same thing now that he's on the board of Meta, so that we can take a look at any and all communications that they made on Fakebook. Okay, thank you, Luca Irving Royal. Appreciate you. All right, so let's move forward. So this is the ethos that originated. Let me pause this. This video here represents kind of why I'm in this fight, okay? And I want you to listen to the lyrics, look at the pictures, and you know what? This will be my first time explaining what this video is all about in excruciating detail. So you see there, Jim Jordan. This was before or maybe right after the 2020 electoral heist in November at Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., and I bumped into Jim Jordan, and I essentially handed him the plan, right? You know how people talk about trust the plan? I really don't trust anybody else's plan because they don't really come up with a good plan. So I create my own. And so my plan was, and I posted it on X, or at the time Twitter, and it explained what the path to exposing the 2020 election was going to be. And since this was probably after the December 23rd timeframe, I can't recall the exact date now, I laid out what the steps should be for members of Congress, particularly Jim Jordan being the former chair of the House Freedom Caucus and a very influential figure in the Republican conference. I thought that he would be able to understand that Congress had a significant role going into January 6th to remedy the 2020 election. And one of those components was to expose what I'm about to present to you in this entire presentation that I essentially handed to him. Okay. So that's why you have this guy. Oh, that was Jesse Banal right here. I was with him. Let me go back. Let me see if I can scroll backwards. If not, then interesting. It won't let me scroll back. Why is that? Maybe I have to exit the full screen and I might be able to manipulate it down here. Interesting. There's no ability to move. All right, I'll just try to do it from here. All right, Jesse Banal. Jesse Banal, attorney for President Trump, former attorney for General Flynn. And this is outside in December after he testified alongside Chris Krebs. Remember Chris Krebs, folks? The guy that headed up CISA, Cybersecurity and Information Security Administration. CISA, part of DHS. The guy that said, the 2020 election was the most safe and secure election ever in the history of humanity. Well, let's take a look what that looks like. Chris Krebs testimony before Ron Johnson in 2020. Let's see if we can pull that up. Where is this little testimony? I'm trying to find that. Might have to look in C-SPAN. Okay, C-SPAN. December 16th was the hearing. Okay. So let's take a look.
This fall, join Dasha Burns as host of Ceasefire, bringing two leaders into a dialogue to find common ground. Ceasefire on C-SPAN.
Oh, can't play this for some reason. Former election security official. I'm trying to get that to play, but in the meantime, they no longer have it. Bottom line here, Chris Krebs was the guy that said it was the most safe and secure election in the history of American politics, right? And no one believed him, but nonetheless, he still went ahead and discussed that. Okay. So the guy testifying with him was Jesse Banal, this individual right here. Let me share screen. There you go. This individual. Fantastic lawyer. He testified and he actually represented President Trump in Nevada. Remember, Nevada was one of the 6 states that were contested. And there he showcased and he actually brought it to trial. But again, just like everywhere else, none of the judges had the courage to hear the merits of the case. I think this one was one of the few that actually got close to it, but it was dismissed, okay, because everyone's a coward. So he knows about this stuff, and he gathered all the evidence in order to showcase that the Nevada election was pretty much illegitimate, okay? So I was with him, and I had the opportunity to be there in Senator Ron Johnson's office and discuss and kind of prep, quasi-prep, in preparation for that hearing. And then here you go. Y'all probably know who this is. This is Patrick Byrne. And oddly enough, I believe that this is the first time that I'd ever met Patrick Byrne. This would have been on the December 12th, maybe time frame. The second MAGA march that occurred in DC after the fraudulent, illegitimate election. And I had presented to Patrick Byrne a plan as well. The same plan that I provided to Jim Jordan, okay? Remember, I'm not in government. I'm just a private citizen in my personal capacity providing information to other individuals. One being a member of Congress, now another person being Patrick Byrne, a private citizen. This was me in the White House. Oh, and so let me explain this picture. A lot of people like to use, a lot of the haters like to bring this picture forward and throw shade. But I'll tell you a little bit of context behind this picture. This picture is obviously myself having dinner with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I agree with her on probably 99.9% of issues over the last several years. And on one of those issues was, hey, I have the play going into January 6th, well, actually going into December 23rd, on how we go ahead and remedy the illegitimate election. December 23rd being what Mike Pence should do as the president of the Senate under his authorities under the Electoral Count Act. And then also on January 6th. So I pretty much laid out the play to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay. And over here was another individual, I believe her chief of staff, and he didn't like some of the words that I had to say. Some of those words were, on January 6th, if Congress doesn't do what we expect them to do, meaning the right thing, then expect immediate eviction, politically, peacefully, and patriotically. Okay. All right. So appeal. I like to throw this screenshot in there in my little video here. Remember when we were all censored on January 8th by the Biden criminal syndicate incoming and the big tech surrogates of the FBI, known as Twitter 1.0? Meaning the general counsel, or excuse me, the former general counsel of the FBI was the number 2 lawyer at Twitter 1.0, a guy by the name of James Baker. And so he had a role in censoring us, myself included, I'm sure. And when Elon Musk purchased it, he gave us an opportunity to appeal. Account being locked, suspended, or having certain features limited on Twitter. If you are attempting to submit for other Twitter support options, you'll need to appeal your account restriction first. So I did that. And oh, by the way, I do know my rights. That song is, by the way, by Chris Webby. And this picture here is none other than Doug Mastriano, who was running for governor later on from Pennsylvania. He was a state senator, still is, I believe. And you can see there, I'm in the second, third row of the rally at the Ellipse. Keep in mind, I'm in my personal capacity. So that means what? I'm not on my contractor status as an instructor at the Defense Intelligence Agency because I took paid time off. And It's called PTO or leave, however you want to call it. So I was in my personal status. And then it was a Wednesday, so I wasn't in my reserve duty as a U.S. Army reservist. I was just simply private citizen Ivan Raiklin. Okay. I know they want to kick me off the socials, all because I get a little too vocal, is the song. And so I wrote in here, some retard criminal banned at Raiklin for providing peaceful, constitutional, legal analysis on remedying the 2020 election. Okay? Now that adults have taken over, maybe we can get reinstated. Remember these folks? The 51 spies who lied? This guy right here, worth noting. You know why? He ends up being the staff director of the January 6th Select Committee for Pelosi and Cheney and Benny Thompson. This guy right here, David Buckley. Who else do we recognize in here? There are Raskins in that list. Okay. Please read the U.S. Constitution and then reread Article 2.1. All these elements of the Constitution and Electoral Count Act. Then read my tweets. Tell me where the problem lies. They didn't like that I was exposing them and wouldn't back down. Okay. So then the hit pieces start, right? Oh, push the Pence card weeks before John Eastman's infamous memo. Yeah, I did that. Roy Tards came out with a hit piece against me, Seth Keshel, who else? Phil Waldron, General Flynn. The only truthful statement about me in this article, honestly, that they got right was that I was a U.S. Army reservist at the time. I think most of the other stuff was just complete bogus. Lies and corruption, and now they looking at me like I'm a disruption. Think for myself, never mind your assumption. There's an article in National File that debunks that Roy Tards article. I don't know why they wrote Reuters. Hostile Roy Tards profile of election integrity activist Ivan Raiklin debunked by facts. Yeah, that's kind of how it usually works, Roy Tards. Watching a slide and decline and destruction. Gotta do something, I'm done waiting. Standing up to tyranny's the foundation of us as a nation. I won't be complacent. I know my rights in their mind till they take them. Okay, let's take a look at this last tweet. That last tweet was essentially my last tweet before they nuked my account, which was, we don't accept the 2020 election results until the state's legislatures in those contested states actually conduct a roll call vote to determine the proper allocation of their electors, or whatever the allocation should be. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about. 2020 illegal election. Okay. All the different components. The Fedsurrection of January 6th. And then the Fedsurrection cover-up. Remember what they did? Well, if you don't remember how they stole the election, here's the general synopsis.
Start with a virus, import it into America. Talk about it nonstop. Call some governors. Nod them. That's your guys. Put patients into nursing homes. Kill thousands. Blame the president. Keep blaming. Blame some more. Lock down small business. Kill the economy. Push mail-in voting. Stoke a race war. Call for riots. Pick a candidate. No, not her. Yeah, that's more like it. Lock him in his basement. Shield him from the press. Don't cover this. Don't cover this. Don't cover this. Keep doing that. Ignore the economic recovery. Downplay the world peace. Pump the polls. Pump. Don't stop pumping. Install your software in swing states. That was fast. Take control of polling stations. Call off the election when you're losing. Kick everyone out. Pull out all the extra ballots. Get the software to do its thing. Get the media to say it's over. Call the big tech guys. Ban anyone who notices. Act like the whole thing never happened. Stealing the most powerful republic in the world. It's that easy.
Yeah, it was kind of that easy. So let's talk about the details of it. I always like to talk about context. Okay. So what was the context when all this occurred? Before 2020, actually, this is where I need to go back 11 years. Remember in 2014 when I was on the Ukraine crisis team in the Pentagon? And then in my personal capacity, I was also observing kind of what was going on in eastern Ukraine and how we observed John Brennan traveling, the CIA director traveling to Ukraine, where he was essentially coordinating the coup with Victoria Nuland in Ukraine. And then they took out Petro Poroshenko and then installed, they removed Viktor Yanukovych, which was a friendly to Russia Ukrainian leader, and then installed Petro Poroshenko about 2014, right? So you ever asked the question on why the auto pen pardoned members of the Biden criminal syndicate going back to 2014? I think about that. And my answer is, well, it's because that's where the serious treason started, okay? The serious crimes. And that's where the 10% for the big guy into the joint bank account started. Joint bank account between Hunter and Joseph Robinette Biden would be my guess. Okay. Now, what does that mean? 2014. Where do I start? Basically, the Biden criminal syndicate signed a deal, 10% for the big guy. That's when good old Obama sent Biden over, right, to Ukraine. And that's where he said, you're not going to get $1 billion if you don't fire the prosecutor that's investigating my son that I just placed on the board of Burisma. So the reason why they had to steal the 2020 election, they had to stop all of the previous treason from being exposed by a second Trump term. And so they went to the lengths of creating a lockdown process, right? If you notice, Biden loses Iowa. Biden loses New Hampshire. And so they had to introduce the lockdowns. And the lockdowns were introduced by whom, folks? This is where you're going to get a little concerned with my First Amendment sounds. Let's take a look. Who ran that COVID task force in the White House starting March of 2020? Everyone likes to say this name, Mikey Fauci. Everyone likes to say Debbie Birx's name. Some even go out and have the courage to mention this guy's name, Mikey Pence, who ran the COVID task force. But many people forget and fail to mention Jared Kushner's name. Why is that? Let's take a look. COVID task force. Jared Kushner. What role did he play? I don't know. Let's take a look. Now, take these sources for what it's worth. Won't let me show it. There's this. Oh, darn, it won't let me pull it up. Well, let's take a look at some of these sources. Share the screen. So do a search, Jared Kushner COVID task force. New documentary says task force was mainly, oh, let's see, did Jared, that's Snopes, no. I think people called him the shadow governor, right? Of that task force. Members of Kushner's shadow task force may have violated law through use of personal email accounts. President's son-in-law formed his own shadow task force composed of government officials and private sector advisors whose primary focus was expanding access to coronavirus testing and acquiring life-saving PPE. Interesting, huh? So what's this all about? Could be nothing. Could be something. So who was making the decisions on the allocation of PPP? On the COVID task force making money hand over fist? Well, I think the best people to ask is Jared Kushner and Mike Pence. So let's ask Jared and Mike Pence. Okay? That's what I'm going to do next. Let's listen in to Jared Kushner and Mike Pence. Let's start with Mike Pence. Okay? So as you listen in, you're going to be able to listen in on Mike Pence from his own audiobook in his own words, discussing things. And then here, after that, we're going to talk about and play a little audio snippet from Jared Kushner's book. So let's listen in to Mike Pence.
Shortly after I took over the task force, Jared Kushner approached me. He told me he was dropping everything he was working on to help me in whatever way I needed. He went to work on logistics, helping to develop what came to be known as Project Airbridge, which expedited the transportation of medical supplies, masks, gowns, thermometers, face shields, and stethoscopes from producers to hospitals and doctors. 2 weeks in, on the evening of Sunday, March 15th, he called me. When I heard his voice on the other end, I could tell he was discouraged about the challenges we were facing in ramping up testing, getting enough medical supplies distributed, and coordinating that effort at the ground level. We can't do this from the White House, he confessed. It's too much. We will never be able to meet the needs. You want me to make you feel better? I asked, not even waiting for his answer. We don't have to, I said. The framers of the Constitution gave us a system of 50 CEOs, leading states across the country. We just need to make sure they have what they need, and they will get it done. To that he sighed in relief, saying, I hadn't thought of it that way, adding, you know what? You're right.
Hadn't thought about it that way. Hadn't really thought about the Constitution either, huh? Hadn't thought about individual rights. Hadn't thought about the Constitution and its impact on the 2020 election heist. Hadn't thought about that. Well, some of us thought about it. Okay? So you can see there in Mike Pence's own words, his work in coordination with Jared Kushner on the CCP-19 task force. Excuse me, the COVID task force, right? COVID-19 task force. All right. So for context, you got to remember that Mike Pence was the chair of the Republican Governors Association in 2016 before he was foisted on President Trump or candidate Trump to be his vice presidential pick. So he's got some relationships, right, with other governors. particularly the Republican ones? Is that maybe why some of the Republican governors sided with the policies pushed forth by this task force? And what policies am I referring to, you may ask? Well, I'm going to answer that using Jared Kushner's own words, read by someone else, but his own words from his own book. Let's listen in.
Turner and the team had finished the first draft of the guidelines. We walked the document to Pence's office for a final review with Birx, Fauci, and Redfield. They offered a few constructive changes, but overall, they were very positive on the document we had produced. "You think the president will support these?" Fauci asked. "I don't know," I said, "but we're going to try." Alone in my office, I called the president to preview the guidelines and give him a chance to react honestly, without fear of the doctors leaking about his response to the press. "Vice President Pence and the doctors are going to come to you with strong public health guidelines," I said. "They may seem draconian, but we think they could save tens of thousands of lives. We are critically low on supplies, and it will take us several weeks to track down more.
Draconian.
Asking people to take these precautions will slow down the spread of the virus, reduce the number of new cases, and buy us much needed time." He understood. That afternoon, we took the guidelines to Trump. Birx, Fauci, and Redfield made their case. "That's it?" Trump said. "I thought you were going to ask me to call in the military to make people stay in their homes. We can't do this forever, but people will tolerate this for a few weeks." At a press conference a few hours later, Trump announced 15 days to slow the spread, which urged all Americans to work and attend school from home, to avoid gatherings of more than 10 people, to postpone travel, to avoid eating or drinking in restaurants and bars, and to refrain from visiting nursing homes and retirement centers.
Interesting, huh? Draconian measures, they say. Why such draconian measures? Well, you heard it. You heard it first or second. I mean, this has been around for a while. I'm just putting it together in their own words. So they presented some draconian measures that resulted in an election heist, a January 6th Fed surrection, massive violations of our rights, illegal mandates. All right. So while that was going on in the White House, while all of these draconian measures were being proposed by Fauci, Birx, Kushner, Pence, Redford, what was going on over at the CIA? Some pronounced CIA. Let's listen in. CIA tried to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely. Remember, they tried to tell us it was a bat suit theory, right? Bat suit, they told us. Interesting. We knew it wasn't bat suit. There's a lab right there. Wuhan Institute of Virology, okay? The lab incident. Whether or not it was intentional or accidental or prematurely intentional, we still don't quite know, do we? So, CIA tried to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely. I don't deal with organizations. I deal in names. So it begs the question, which officials try to pay off analysts? And what relationship do those officials of the CIA that tried to pay off analysts? What are their relationships to, wait for it, The 51 spies who lied. Eh? So let's take a look here. The CIA tries to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely. Let's pull up another tab. Okay. And do a search. That search should be, I don't know, something like Politico, Hunter Biden, laptop, memo. Well, look at this, what we have here. Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo. Dozens of former intel officials say. More than 50 former intel. Okay. More than 50 former senior intelligence. Let's zoom in here. This is the article from Politico. Okay. Politico. See that? We take a look at the title. Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say. Then we look at the article. Let's zoom in further so that you can see it nice and close. More than 50 former senior intelligence officials have signed onto a letter outlining their belief that the recent disclosure of emails allegedly belonging to Joe Biden's son has all the classic earmarks of Russian information operation. Let's take a look at the letter. Okay. All right, so here's the letter. See if we can zoom in a little bit. Let's take a look at this letter, because many of you probably haven't even seen it. October 19th, just before the election, right? We are all individuals who devoted significant portions of our lives to national security. Some of us served in senior positions in policy departments and agencies, and some of us served in senior positions in the intel community. Some of us were political appointees, and some were career officials. Many of us worked for presidents of both political parties, deep state, uniparty, right? We're all also individuals who see Russia as one of our nation's primary adversaries. All of us have an understanding of the wide range of Russian overt and covert activities that undermine U.S. national security. Okay? With some of us knowing Russian behavior intimately as we work to defend our nation against it for a career. A few of us worked against Russian information operations in the U.S. in the last several years. Perhaps most important, each of us believes deeply that American citizens should determine the outcome of elections, not foreign governments. Agreed. All of us agree with the founding fathers' concern about the damage that foreign influence, foreign interference in our politics can do to our democracy. Okay? It is for all these reasons that we write to say that the arrival on the U.S. political scene of emails purportedly belonging to Vice President Biden's son Hunter, much of it related to his time serving on the board of Ukrainian gas company Burisma, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. They're providing top cover to the Biden criminal syndicate because we all know that laptop was legit. All of it. Okay. And what do they do further? Let's go through this. We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are genuine or not, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement. Just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case. Significant role. More BS. If we're right, this is Russia trying to influence how Americans vote in this election. We believe strongly that Americans need to be aware of this. There are a number of factors that make us suspicious of Russian involvement. And then they go into the details, right? Such an operation would be consistent with Russian objectives, as outlined publicly and recently by the intelligence. So they're literally trying to divert people's attention from the actual facts of the Biden criminal syndicate and divert and distract. Okay? Let's take a look who signed this. Jim Clapper. Let's take a look. DNI, Undersecretary of Defense for Intel, former NGA director, former DI director. Mike Hayden, CIA former director. Leon Panetta, former CIA director. John Brennan, former CIA director. Thomas Finger, former chair of the National Intelligence Council, right? Which is mostly staffed by CIA. Who else? John McLaughlin, former acting CIA director. Mike Morrell, former acting CIA director. Mike Vickers, former operations officer, CIA. Doug Wise, CIA. See a trend here? Russ Travers. National Counterterrorism Center, former analyst of Soviet Union and Russia. So if you're at the National Counterterrorism Center, you're likely CIA. Former acting director, National Counterterrorism Center. Andy Lipman, CIA. John Mosman, CIA. Larry Pfeiffer, CIA. Jeremy Bash, CIA. Rodney Snyder, CIA. David Buckley, former Inspector General, CIA. This is the guy that ended up running cover for Nancy Pelosi for the January 6th Fedsurrection, folks. Why am I the only one looking at this? Wake your government up. Cash, Dan, hello. You out there? Pam? Hello? Speaker Mike Johnson, you there? Hello? Anybody there? Knock, knock. Congressman Loudermilk? Hello? Let's keep going. Nada Bakos, CIA. Patty Brandmeier, CIA. James Bruce, CIA. David Carrions. You get my point here, right? CIA, 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 CIA. Likely CIA. If he was a national intel officer. I've been talking a lot the last few days, so that's why I'm coughing. Kent Harrington, CIA. Okay. Former senior national security executive. I wonder where. What do you think, folks? You want to guess? Timothy Kilborn, CIA. Ron Marks, CIA. Jonah Heinz Mendez, CIA. CIA. Gerald O'Shea, CIA. David Price, CIA. Pam Persley, CIA. Mark Polymeropoulos, CIA. Chris Sabo, CIA. Are you getting the picture here, folks? Nick Shapiro, CIA. John Cipher, CIA. Stephen Slick, CIA. Cynthia Strand, CIA. Greg Tarbell, CIA. David Terry, CIA. Greg Treverton, National Intelligence Council, former chair, likely CIA. John Tillius, CIA. David Vannell, CIA. Winston Woolley, CIA. Kristen Wood, CIA. Am I making my point? How many of these were CIA? How about almost all of them? The 51 letter. Oh, and by the way, a lot of people forget. In addition, 9 additional former IC officers who cannot be named publicly also support the arguments in this letter. I wonder who those 9 are. Let's identify one of them. And I wrote a little article about him in my Substack. Speaking of, care to join my Substack? It's ivanraiklin.substack.com. Okay. Let's take a look here. Let's go open another tab. See if I can find this individual. I think I have to go to my Substack to remember this guy's name because it's been so long since I wrote the Substack article. Been doing this for so many years. Okay. There we go. Is John Brennan's former CIA cabal defrauding your daily information intake? His former CIA disinformation messiah continuing his disinfo campaign on America via his DHS academia and media contacts. So this was back in the day when he became the disinformation czar, if you will, under the Biden criminal syndicate over at DHS as an advisor. See this name right here? JD Maddox. You want to know more? I think that's one of the 9 that are listed that are right here, right? In addition, 9 additional former IC officers who cannot be named publicly also support the arguments in this letter. Well. It very well may be JD Maddox. Okay. And for details, go ahead and read that. Now let's go back. My point here is that the 51 that are named here and the 9 that are not named here are mostly CIA. And they were very senior officials of the CIA and the National Intelligence Council, and then ended up being at the DNI. So then it begs the question for a normal critical thinker to ask, well. I wonder if this right here, where it says CIA tried to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely. I wonder how many of those 51 leveraged their influence to ensure that those that are active in CIA leadership paid off those analysts on this analytic assessment on the origins of COVID so that people wouldn't think it was originating in the lab. And it was a lab incident. Okay. So I'm going to ask you folks in the live chat to respond. What's the likelihood from your perspective, and use a percentage, of 51 spies, okay, that these 51 that signed this letter saying that the Biden criminal syndicate laptop had all the earmarks of a Russian info campaign? How many of those, or if at least one, influenced and tried to pay off their former employees, their former analysts, to go ahead and change the analytic assessment or bury the findings of the real origins of COVID-19? Waiting on some comments. Anyone? Oh, wow. I have some folks that are tuning in from CommieTube as well. What's up, fellas? I wonder how long they're going to allow this video to be up, because I'm going to be calling them out too. Oh, looks like a couple people left. Got too scared. Too truthful, huh? Feel the burn of truth? Okay. Oh, here we go. CommieTuber just commented. Oh, wait. 51 not so intelligent officials stupid enough to put their names on a list. Who conspired? Okay, that was good. All right, so I'm getting some feedback here. 99%. Irmina says, yo, they all in on it. nobody left out. And then another person says 100%. I would tend to agree it's somewhere in between 99 and 100%. And for all intents and purposes, if you're actually presenting a case, a criminal case, all you have to do is present to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? 99% surpasses the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt from my perspective. So, now you know who was involved in allegedly. See this here? These were the folks that were writing all the assessments and their former employees that they were communicating with saying, hey, don't say anything bad about the origins of, make sure that it's bat soup. And oh, by the way, let's call our friends over at the Chris Krebs and the FBI and let them know to go ahead and censor folks that are not in line with what we're putting out. Let's continue. Not only was that assessment doctored and manipulated, what else was going on during this period of time of the 2020 electoral heist? Wait, I got a comment here from Luca. 100% following this for years. We've got to take the swamp down completely. They're all in it together. FBI, CIA, they've all been paid off. The judges, you name it. Yeah, so how much evidence do we need? Well, it's all out there. I'm just helping put it together a little bit differently. So keep in mind that, remember there were COVID changes to election procedures in 39 states, voting procedure modifications for the general election. Guess what that means, folks? 39 electoral slates that were transmitted in 2020 were illegitimate, were unlawful because they were done not according to that state's election law. But let's go back here. What else happened? Mark Zuckerberg bribed to the tune of $400 million. Wait, but Ivan, it wasn't a bribe, you say? Let's go ahead and pull that up. Mark Zuckerberg apology letter. Let's see if I can find that nice little tweet where Mark Zuckerberg apologizes for his bribery. Ooh, I found it right there. Let's go ahead and read it. Oh, excuse me. I appreciate the committee's interest in content moderation on online platforms. As you are aware, Meta has produced thousands of documents. Let's see. In 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, meaning the Biden criminal syndicate, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content. Oh, so what are you referring to when you say COVID-19 content, Mark? Does that include the origins of COVID? Does that include all the products? Right? Does that include what else, folks? Give me some ideas. I think everyone knows what that means. COVID-19, okay? That means the CCP lab origin. That includes the manipulation of saying that the products were safe and effective. Okay. See, bro, the fact Ivan isn't already on half. I don't quite understand what you mean there, J-Lo macaque. So COVID-19 content, all right, includes humor and satire, trying to divert from the actual censorship, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down. We own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. Yeah, when you killed and slaughtered folks, right? Allegedly, as a result of these decisions. Okay. So, yeah, I believe the government pressure was wrong. And I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. It's called treason, buddy. I'm not going to forget it. Okay. This administration has already forgotten it because they invited you into the White House as they treated you with gave you the white glove treatment. Most of America is not that forgiving. All right. What else? In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. Wait, see that right here in the small print? Isn't that the same thing? That Mark Zuckerberg is discussing is this particular 51 spies who lied, but yet the FBI were the ones to go ahead and contact Mark Zuckerberg, right? Disinformation operation, Biden family that fall when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving the then presidential nominee Joe Biden. We sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it. Who were your fact checkers, buddy? I wonder who your fact checker was, Mark. I know who it was for X. It was Reuters. And the CEO of Reuters is on the board of, or vice versa. I can't remember now. I've done this for so many years. Reuters CEO is on the board of Pfizer. Okay. So the Pfizer guy tells himself to go ahead and censor the COVID stuff. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Okay. So let's keep looking through this memo. So the Russian disinfo, and then what else? Oh, and then apart from content moderation, I want to address the contributions I made during the last presidential cycle to support electoral infrastructure, he calls it. The idea here was to make sure local election jurisdictions across the country had the resources they needed to help people vote safely during a global pandemic. Wait, bro, you just said the whole COVID-19 scam was bullshit. And then you said that the whole Biden criminal syndicate laptop wasn't Russian disinfo. You apologized to that. Now you're saying that, I bribed to the tune of 400 million all throughout the whole country to steal the 2020 election, in addition to all of the other lies and manipulation. I'm not as forgiving, okay? So if we don't get to punishing you in this administration, it must occur in the future. And guess what, bro? Mr. Suckabuck? You want to know something? Well, you want me to fill you in on a little secret? I'm going to pull up a little statute for you. It's called Statute of Limitations for Capital Offenses. Let's see what that looks like, folks. Let's see. Oh, let me share my screen. Statute of limitations. Aside from capital offenses, there we go. An indictment for any offense punishable by death may be found at any time without limitation. Let me pull up 18 USC, section 3281. Oh, let me share that screen for you, Mark Zuckerbuck, just for you. This is just for you, buddy boy. See that? 18, criminal federal statute, right? U.S. Code, section 3281. Capital offenses. Let's see what we find. Let's read along together. Let's learn our ABCs. Section 3281. An indictment for any offense punishable by death may be found at any time without limitation. Okay? Let me zoom in. See that? Title 18, 3281. An indictment for any offense punishable by death may be found at any time without limitation. So, if we look up treason in the Constitution, let's see what we find. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Meaning foreign, right? The CCP, the lab incident that slaughtered how many Americans? No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. It's even in the Constitution, folks. Okay? So, if you're convicted of treason or even indicted for treason, Mr. Zuckerberg, what do you think happens? Well, you know what the maximum punishment is. It's capital punishment. Okay? And so, let's take a look at that. Punishment for treason. Let's find a statute. 18. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't share the screen. Let's do that as we ride along together. Okay. Treason. Whoever owing allegiance is guilty of treason and shall suffer death or shall be imprisoned not less than 5 years and fined. Okay? So that's capital punishment. Now, if there's capital punishment, that means you could potentially be charged at any time ever in your life because there's no statute of limitations. That's the point I'm trying to make, folks. And I think I made my point. Let's go back. So that's good old Mark Zuckerberg. Okay? That's him right here. In that little apology letter, right? Where he admits to providing cover for the COVID stuff, right? In the White House. Right? And then providing cover for how elections were illegally conducted in 39 states. And providing cover for the Biden criminal syndicate laptop emails, right? Isn't that interesting? And providing cover for the 51 spies who lied. Yes. And the foreign interference. And the 51, 60, remember 9 unnamed? And oh, by the way, he bribed in many of these states. And what else happened? Wisconsin ruled that the drop boxes were illegal, rendering their 10 electors illegitimate. Arizona had the audit, rendering their 11 electors illegitimate. Pennsylvania Supreme Court usurped the manner and process upon which the legislature had directed to follow election laws. rendering their 20 electors illegitimate. Georgia, mail-in ballots illegitimate and consent decree illegitimate, rendering their 16 electors illegitimate. Michigan, an audit in Antrim County showed that there was a flip, rendering that election and those electors illegitimate. Nevada, let's take a look at the map. Nevada ran their elections according to COVID rules. Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania. And then you're like, wait, Ivan, it looks like Georgia ran their elections legitimately. Well, if you refer to COVID stuff, technically, but when you refer to the consent decree between Stacey Abrams and good old Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp, illegitimate, illegal, more electors illegitimate. Okay. New Mexico, counties auto sent mail-in ballots, illegit. Nebraska, Don Bacon's district over here. Oh, wait. Nebraska ran their elections also under COVID rules, rendering that to be illegitimate, not only in Don Bacon's district. New Hampshire conducted an audit, rendering and showing that it was also illegitimate in New Hampshire. But wait, New Hampshire also ran their election under COVID rules, violating Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. So how many electors is that, folks? That's quite a few. 11 in Arizona, 6 in Nevada, 10 in Wisconsin, 16 in Michigan, 16 in Georgia, 20 in Pennsylvania. What was it? 4 in New Hampshire. That's a lot of electors. That's a lot of illegitimate electors that Joseph Robinette Biden, meaning Biden, received in 2020. Okay. Let's keep moving. Let's see what we got. Yeah, W.M. Arthur. I've been saying the same thing for 5 years. Welcome to the club. Or I should say, well, hopefully you join me in your club. J-Lo McCack. I got a mail-in ballot for my dogs in Georgia as well. That's what you said, okay? All right, so let's keep moving. So here's the timeline of the 2020 election, okay? So before November 3rd, you had all this illegitimate seasonal mail-in and the non-standard voting, right? The voting that you can't really rely on as being legitimate. What I consider legitimate is one day in-person paper ballot hand count, right? You show up, you vote, it's counted by other human beings and rendered whether or not it's legitimate or not. And that's how the election laws are mostly done throughout the country. But due to COVID, everything changed. So November 3rd was technically the election, right? And then from November 3rd until December 8th was a time frame, basically about 5 weeks for, under the Electoral Count Act, it's a guidance for the states to go ahead and do what? States decide which electors to certify as their legitimate electors, meaning from November 3rd to December 8th. Now, before I move on, I'm going to take a little commercial break, and then we'll be back here shortly. So stand by. Still haven't tried 1775 coffee? Now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality Mushroom Coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All single, original, small batch, toxin-free, and mold-free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A froth strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions. And a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for only $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1776 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Okay. Had to take a little break, so I had to play a little commercial. Thanks for sticking around. Okay. Back to the electoral process of 2020. This is how it was totally illegitimate, okay? If you don't believe it was illegitimate up to this point, based on what I just laid out the last hour and 10 minutes, 11 minutes, I'm going to show you some more shenanigans that I've been talking about for the last 5 years. Okay, November 3rd, states conduct illegal election certifications up until December 8th, 20. That should say 2020. Okay. What does that mean? So each state has 5 weeks, so from November 3rd until December 8th, to determine, to certify, recheck, recount, all that stuff. So for 5 weeks they have it, or any litigation to happen. Okay. And on December 8th, under the Electoral Count Act, is when the states are supposed to decide which of the electors that they're going to certify. Meaning, do the votes support a Republican electoral slate, or does the vote support allocating the Democratic electoral slate? Okay. So the way it works is states under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 create election laws. That election law allows for the popular vote to happen, and then the popular vote is what dictates how the electors will be allocated. Well, if you don't have a legitimate underlying election, because it was done outside of Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, then guess what? No matter how you conducted the vote, as long as it was done under these COVID procedures in violation of the election laws of the state, even though the governor said, oh, due to COVID, we're going to run the election this way. Oh, the Secretary of State's going to do the same thing. Oh, the county clerk, whatever. Those are all illegitimate. They're not legitimate elections. And thusly, the electors that the states transmitted or decided on this day cannot be legitimate because the election wasn't done legitimately, okay, in 39 states. Okay, so but some other things that happened. On December 11th, the Supreme Court, what do they rule? Texas versus Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia. Justice Roberts blocks the case from happening, saying that there's no standing. State of Texas motion for leave to file a bill of complaint is denied for lack of standing under Article 3 of the Constitution. Texas has not demonstrated a judicially cognizable interest in the manner in which another state conducts its elections. So, John Roberts, appointed by George W. Bush, the same year George W. Bush appoints Rod Rosenstein as U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, but I digress. Same district where John Bolton is being prosecuted. But I digress even further. We won't go there because that'll be another 3-hour rabbit hole that I don't want to discuss right now. But just take note of that if you want to do your own research. Justice Roberts basically says, you know what, Texas, Pennsylvania, like all these other states, they can go ahead and violate the law. You have no standing. even though you're a member of you're a state of the constitutional republic. Okay. December 14th is when the Electoral Count Act guides the states to actually hold a vote of the electors that they identified. So you got an election, electors are picked. Those electors then actually do a physical vote on December 14th of 2020 in their respective state capitals. Okay. And that becomes official at the state level. But here's where I start to get involved in expressing all this online on X, on Twitter at the time. So December 18th is the next crucial date, because in Executive Order 13848, which was signed by President Trump in September of 2018, it states, not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a U.S. election, the Director of National Intelligence shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. So I knew this. A lot of us knew this and warned, saying that, hey, wait, if the election is on November 3rd, 45 days later is December 18th. Okay. And that's a nice date, because you'll find out that the next date's important too. But on December 18th was when the Director of National Intelligence, a guy by the name of John Ratcliffe at the time, who's now the CIA director. But back then, John Ratcliffe was the Director of National Intelligence. And what happened? He did not submit this assessment by December 18th of 2020. And the reason why you need it by December 18th is so that on December 23rd, under the Electoral Count Act, the Vice President can make a determination and incorporate this assessment on whether or not to inform the states if they want to correct their electoral slate allocation. It's a system of checks and balances. So why did he not provide the assessment? Any reasons? What do you guys think? Why do you think that he didn't do that? I have my ideas. I want to hear yours. Well, here are my ideas. Remember these guys back here? CIA tried to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely. You think those same analysts over at the CIA that are assessing whether or not there was foreign interference in the 2020 election, you think that they are also being paid off and influenced in order to block John Ratcliffe from exposing the foreign interference by China? You guys can look this up yourselves. Here, play along with me. Let's go to this other. Let's just do a search and just play along with me. ODNI, Intelligence Community Assessments. Let's make it even clearer. 2020, or origins of COVID-19. Let's look at that one first. See this right here? Intelligence.gov. Read the COVID-19 origins report. See that right there? I do. Let's take a look at the assessment. Remember, I used to teach analysts to write products like this, okay? To be professional analysts. And here's the assessment. Let me zoom in fully so you can see and just play along with me, okay? Updated assessment on COVID-19 origins. After examining all available intelligence reporting and other information, the ICA remains divided on the most likely origins of COVID. All agencies assess that two hypotheses are plausible: natural exposure to an infected animal and a lab-associated incident. Okay? What's the first one they talk about? The first hypothesis is what? 4 IC elements in the National Intelligence Council assessed with low confidence that the initial SARS-CoV-2 infection was most likely caused by natural exposure to an animal infected with it or a close progenitor virus, a virus that probably would be more than 99% similar to SARS-CoV-2. These analysts give weight to China's official lack of foreknowledge and the numerous vectors for natural exposure and other factors. So they gave weight to China's officials' lack of knowledge. How did they know China's officials' lack of knowledge, folks? What? Chinese officials are going to tell the truth about their involvement in the release of a lab incident? Okay. If you believe that, then you might want to, I guess for those that believe that, probably don't want you in my feed, but before you leave, you can go ahead and give me a tip and donate because I read that off for you, okay? Because you're probably part of that deep state scum. But I will, take any tips from you in monetary form so that I can continue to expose you, okay? Now, for those of you that are critical thinkers, you probably lean more towards this. One IC element assesses with moderate confidence. Maybe that's why it's moderate. So this one here assessed with low confidence. And that's what you are allowed to talk about on FBI surrogate platforms known as Facebook that Mark Zuckerberg was complicit in, as well as Twitter 1.0, where that censorship industrial complex was effectively led by FBI's former general counsel, Jim Baker, who was then the Twitter 1.0 number 2 lawyer. So let's read this. One IC element assesses with moderate confidence that the first human infection of SARS with SARS-CoV-2 most likely was the result of a laboratory-associated incident. Laboratory-associated incident. Moderate confidence. Lab-associated incident. Probably involving experimentation, animal handling, or sampling by Wuhan Institute of Virology. These analysts give weight to the inherently risky nature of work on coronaviruses. Interesting, huh? But when you talked about this, what did Mark Zuckerberg do? I'd like to remind you what Mark Zuckerberg did when you talked about this particular moderately level of confidence supported hypothesis of the origins of COVID. Here's what Mark Zuckerberg did to you. Let's bring it back. Oh, wait for it. He did this. He worked with the administration for months to censor certain COVID-19 content. You see that? How is that not treason, America? And other criminal activity that needs to be prosecuted? All right. Analysts at 3 IC elements remain unable to coalesce around either explanation without additional information. So it'd be nice to know who were the analysts that wrote this And were those analysts in any way, shape, or form directed, coaxed, coerced, or bribed by the 51 signing this letter? Or I'd like to see communications. Okay. Let's look at all the communications between these 51 and guess who else? Those 51 and those that wrote this assessment right here. Director Gabbard, if you're listening in, and anyone that works for her, Director of the CIA, John Radcliffe, why haven't you disclosed this yet? They duped you, okay? And so now that you're the director of the CIA, you can look into this. And you can write up criminal referrals over to the DOJ, can't you? Potentially, depending on what you find. This is important. I've been saying this for quite some time. All right, so let's go back to our slideshow. Let's go to, excuse me, right here, Executive Order 13848. So how many of those 51 coerced the analysts to basically tell John Radcliffe that, hey, you know what? Oh, it's so much effort. It's going to take us way more time to provide you our analytic assessment than by December 18th, even though there's an executive order that dictates it. So they're in violation of this particular executive order. I don't know about you, but that looks like subversion to me. Has all the earmarks of a subversion campaign, doesn't it, America? What else is on December 18th? Remember this visit to the White House resulted in a temporary success. They met with President Trump, Patrick Byrne, Sidney Powell, General Flynn. I wonder if Patrick Byrne on December 18th, let's go back to that initial video I played. Remember that plan? I wonder if Patrick Byrne provided aspects of the plan that I handed to him. Let's go ahead and refresh your memory. Remember I handed it to him? Basically, what I had presented to Patrick Byrne may have been provided, at least partially, to the president. I don't know these things, but Patrick Byrne might. So then what was in there? I offered up using golf analogy, since President Trump has golf courses and he likes to golf, I had presented an option. Imagine a golf ball. Here, I got to do this. Imagine the golf ball is, oh, you can't even see me anymore. Interesting. So imagine the golf. Wait, let me see if I can change the dynamics of the stream, because I really wanted to use this analogy, but I may not be able to. Stop sharing. Okay. Whatever. This happened last time. So imagine the analogy where you have a golf ball, 49% of it is over the hole, and 51% of it isn't. What are the chances of that ball being placed into the hole? I would say like 100%, right? So that was effectively the plan that I had provided. And what was that plan? It was this right here, at least partially. So what was that plan? On December 22nd of 2020, an individual by the name of Ivan Raiklin did what? In my personal capacity as private citizen Ivan Raiklin, just wanting to exercise my First Amendment online, I posted a tweet and it says, America, VP Mike Pence must do this tomorrow to defend our Constitution from our enemies, foreign, China, Russia, Iran, and domestic big tech censorship, mainstream media censorship, corrupt officials at the federal, state, and local levels. Let them know. Okay? So this was done on December 22nd. But then it was retweeted by President Trump the following evening. So that Mike Pence, by midnight, or 11:59 and 59 seconds of December 23rd, would actually follow the Electoral Count Act and send back to the states, at a minimum to those that are contested, but maybe to 39 of them, that what they transmitted was illegitimate. It violated the federal Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. And what did Mike Pence do after this memo was retweeted by President Trump? Well, let's listen in to Mike Pence in his own words what he did. Wait for it. I wonder if this will play. Come on, Mike Pence. Wait for it. For some reason, it's not playing. Interesting. This is where it gets nice and interesting. Let me try to share it again. All right, stand by. Okay, let's listen in. Interesting that it's not playing. Come on, Mike Pence. This is important. There we go.
As our Air Force 727 made its way across the American heartland en route to the Rocky Mountains, a tweet came across that was a harbinger.
Oh, what happened there? Deep State doesn't want you to hear that one, huh? Not at all. We're going to keep trying, though. Let's see if we can't get that to play. Listen closely. Wait a second. It's not allowing me to share and play it. Let me try again. Okay, here we go. Interesting. It is not playing. I want you to hear in Mike Pence's own words. That's quite unfortunate. Let me try this again. Interesting, America. It's always when you get to the juicy parts that they don't want you to hear and see it. I'm doing what I can. Okay, you can see the screen.
As our Air Force 727 made its way across the American heartland en route to the Rocky Mountains, a tweet came across that was a harbinger of things to come. That night, President Trump retweeted on his @RealDonaldTrump account to nearly 100 million followers an obscure internet message without comment titled Operation Pence Card. The article alluded to the theory that if all else failed in election challenges in states across the country, there was still the Pence Card, meaning that I could somehow alter the outcome of the election in my role as presiding officer over the counting of Electoral College votes submitted by the states on January 6th. I showed it to Karen and rolled my eyes, thinking, here we go.
That's right, little buddy. Here we go. And it's 5 years into it, right? Here's one thing I need to correct you on, of many, but I'll just focus on this one as it relates to this particular clip. Hey, Mike Pence, reread this. Nowhere in any way, shape, or form did this have anything to do with January 6th. This memo refers to the Electoral Count Act, wherein it's up to you as the President of the Senate by the fourth Wednesday of December. I believe it's Title III U.S. Code Section 12. We can pull that one up, but I think it may have been amended since. Let's take a look. 3 U.S.C. 12. Failure of certificates of electors to reach President of the Senate or Archivist of the U.S. Demand on state for certificate. Okay? Yeah, this is it. When after the meeting of the electors shall have been held, no certificate of vote mentioned in sections 9 and 11 of this title from any state shall have been received by the President of the Senate, meaning Mike Pence at the time, by the fourth Wednesday in December. Back then, that would have been December 23rd. The President of the Senate, that's Mike Pence, or if the President of the Senate be absent from the seat of government, he wasn't. That would mean the archivists. We're good there. By the most expeditious method available, the chief election officer of the state to send up the certificate lodged with such officer by the electors of such state. Meaning, it's up to Mike Pence at the time to send to the most expeditious, to demand that the states submit legitimate slates of electors. And it will be the duty of such chief election officer of the state upon receipt of such request by Mike Pence to immediately transmit same by the most expeditious method available to the President of the Senate, meaning Mike Pence. So this section right here explains explicitly that, guess what? Mike Pence, I'm warning you, buddy. I'm telling you in this tweet with this memo attached to it that what you received December 20th, well, that was transmitted to you. Let me show you. On December 18th, excuse me, December, let me go to the right slide, 14th, because on December 14th is when the states voted and then transmitted to you, Mike Pence, sometime after or on December 14th, their electoral slates, meaning their electoral slates were illegal, illegitimate across the board. And so now the first time you have responsibility to touch it, Mike Pence, is December 23rd, according to this statute, because they failed to transmit legitimate electors to you. Failure of certificates of electors to reach President of the Senate. When after the meeting of the electors, which would have been December 14th, have been held, no certificate of vote mentioned from any state shall have been received by the president of the Senate, then he's supposed to demand of them by the 4th, right? They're supposed to send by the 4th Wednesday. So when they failed to send to Mike Pence on December 23rd, the 4th Wednesday of December of 2020, his responsibility is to do what? It's to do this. The president of the Senate, so the chief election officer send up certificates lodged that such officer by the electors. You can read this. They're required to send to Mike Pence, as the president of the Senate, lawful, legitimate electoral slates. Notice, it didn't matter. Any and all electors that were transmitted based on the elections that were done according to COVID rules rendered those electors as illegitimate. Additionally, you had the foreign interference. Additionally, you had the bribery. COVID changes, the bribery, the fake book, right? The foreign interference, the 51 spies, 60, right? Spies who lied. And then you had all of these multiple layers in addition to these national level actions that rendered the election illegitimate. You had each state also, in addition to that, rendering them illegitimate. So then I took it upon myself to warn Mikey P that now that the ball is in your court, the 4th Wednesday in December, you are obligated at this point to defend your oath to the Constitution, specifically defending Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, to make sure that states allocate their electors under the provisions of the Constitution, meaning that the state legislatures are the ones that allocate their electors. And when non-legislative actors such as governors, secretaries of state, state Supreme Courts decide to do that, it is up to Mikey P, okay? Mikey P to make sure that those electors are allocated according to the federal Constitution, meaning the state legislatures. And that's what I tweeted. And that's what President Trump retweeted. And Mikey Pence did what? He didn't do anything. And so what happens next? As a reminder, this is what the J6 Select Committee, the beloved Mike Pence and Liz Cheney J6 cover-up committee did. They tried to investigate me. And once again, it's not letting me play for some reason. Let me press this. Okay, listen closely.
December 23rd, President Trump retweeted a memo from an individual named Ivan Raiklin entitled Operation Pence Card that called on the vice president to refuse the Electoral College votes from certain states that had certified Joe Biden as the winner.
States across the country that conducted their elections outside of how the state legislatures had approved them.
That's right. Mikey, did you just say I was right? Oh, I know you did. And you know I'm right. Okay? It's unfortunate you didn't listen to me. And that's why many people later on were calling you names that you didn't like. So back to this. You failed to listen. I mean, I gave you the answer sheet, bro. You failed to follow the answer sheet. Okay? So then you decided to investigate me with your boys. Okay? But before I get there, same day POTUS retweets the Pence card memo. Pence proceeds with violating the Electoral Count Act by refusing to send back the illegally transmitted slates of electors as required by the Electoral Count Act. Notice the provisions of Title III U.S. Code, Section 12. So here's where we go. So we go from December 23rd into January 3rd. Okay. Remember, election occurs both the presidential and the congressional. So Congress becomes majority Democrat in the House. Well, I should say remains. And so what happens? January 3rd is when Nancy Pelosi is elected as the Speaker of the House, because the new Congress starts on January 3rd. There are some names on here that I want to talk about. Are they on the deep state target list? You betcha. Okay. January 3rd, everybody was in the chambers in the House to vote for Nancy Pelosi, even though COVID was in high gear, right? But 3 days later, it wasn't a full quorum on January 6th. But we'll get there. So Nancy Pelosi on January 3rd, the new Congress convenes. She becomes the Speaker. The General Counsel of the U.S. Capitol Police remains Tad DeBias, this guy right here. The head of Intel and Interagency Coordination Division, Yogananda Pittman. The mayor of D.C. at the time, these are key characters and figures you need to know, is Mayor Bowser, who remains the mayor. The sergeant at arms, the chief law enforcement officer on the House side, reporting directly to Nancy Pelosi, is Paul Irving. Okay. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, Mark Milley, and Pelosi, and Bowser, and Secretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy all say, due to the optics, and Paul Irving tells Chief Sund that due to optics, don't want to have DC National Guard protecting the Capitol. Okay, here's the deal. It's the Capitol Police Board that protects the Capitol through the Capitol Police. And what was Chief Sund doing from January 3rd to January 6th? Asking for additional resources on 6 occasions for the upcoming rally on January 6th. So that's January 3rd set up. January 5th, 2 days later, you got a nice little tweet by Mayor Bowser. And she says, to be clear, the District of Columbia is not requesting other federal law enforcement personnel and discourages any additional deployment without immediate notification to and consultation with Metropolitan Police Department if such plans are underway. That's right, folks. So now what? This is the DC Democrat telling the executive branch that, please, we're not requesting any federal law enforcement, and you got to coordinate with us if you do. So let's take a look here. January 5th, right? So on January 5th, the mayor says, no, don't deploy any executive branch stuff. Because let's just say hypothetically, Mayor Bowser is working with Pelosi to make preparations for the Fedsurrection, allegedly. So if that was the case, how do they run a Fedsurrection? You missed my Saturday long stream on this. You can go into it in the pipe bomb, specifically on the pipe bomb issue. I go into depth on that particular issue. You can watch that. But a couple of things that I didn't mention that we need to look into today is on January 5th, this tweet comes out. at 1:53 p.m. At 7:30, 6 hours later, is when your boy or girl is out there placing pipe bombs. At the same time, why aren't we looking at what Ray Epps, John Sullivan, and Michael Voss are doing, meaning Nancy Pelosi's son-in-law? And why is he at the Marriott, JW Marriott, with John Sullivan, the supposed inner breach team leader? I digress, but maybe that's pretty important, Dan Cash, Pam. Washington fake officers investigating this. So let's go back here. Let's go back to this statute that we discussed on Saturday. Remember we talked about law enforcement authority of the U.S. Capitol Police and the jurisdiction? Let's take a look at where their jurisdiction starts in the northwestern portion of that jurisdictional limit. It says the area bounded by north curb of H Street from 3rd Street northwest. Let's take a look at the map. Third Street, huh? H and 3rd northwest. Well, there's 3rd Street. And this looks like H, but H is also over here. See that? H Street northwest. 3rd. So that's the northwest limit. Okay. Interesting. Guess who's just outside of it? I think I needed to look at it from a satellite view, or maybe hybrid to begin with. So this right here, U.S. Capitol Police limit extended jurisdiction zone limitation, is this street right here. So would you think that the U.S. Capitol Police probably coordinates stuff and deconflicts things with FBI police right here? Between 3rd and 4th Street Northwest and G and F Street Northwest right there. For those that want to know what the building looks like, it looks like that. Okay. Just like that. Now let's take a look in more depth. So that's the Washington field office of the FBI. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories or so, right? 6 floors. And guess who? Oh, look at that. FBI has their own police. Okay. But be careful. This isn't 3rd Street. This is 4th Street between F and G. Okay. Let's take a look at 3rd Street and what that looks like on the other side of the building. Okay. Let's take a look here on what things look like. Okay. Let's take a look at how that looks over here. 3rd Street. Voila. So, can U.S. Capitol Police officers patrol in this area? Sure they can. Because we just looked at the statute that allows for it, didn't we? Let's review that again. Let's zoom in. North curb of 8th Street from 3rd Street Northwest to 7th Northeast. Let's go back. And look at that. This is 3rd Street. You don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at the signs. Maybe we can find a sign where it says 3rd Street. Like if I turn around here, there's G and there's 3rd Street. See that? 3rd and G. So let's go on this side. So there's another little parking, a little loading dock, garage. Yeah. Some more stuff. So if I'm the FBI police, right? I probably talk, coordinate, communicate, deconflict, right? With any U.S. Capitol police officers that are patrolling their perimeter to protect members of Congress, right? In the buildings. Okay. Now, who would be responsible for all that interagency coordination with the Washington field office? What do you guys think? Oh, wait, I forgot to show you I was sharing the screen here, not even showing you guys. So there's 3rd. See that? Got a little too far overzealous. So this right here is 3rd Street. Okay. You can see right there, 3rd Street. And there you go. It's the east side of Washington field office. You can see the garage and loading dock. And you can see the FBI. Police. Right here. So if you have U.S. Capitol police officers that are patrolling this street, they're probably deconflicting and coordinating, syncing, etc., with the FBI police, and maybe, just maybe, the folks here in the building itself at Washington field office headquarters, the ones tasked with investigating the Fedsurrection, right? Now, how far away is this from the Capitol, folks? Let's take a look, just for context. What do we have here? So if that's the FBI's Washington field office, here you have the Senate office buildings. Okay, so not too far. This is where the Clay Higgins buses were found that he says are FBI buses. Not too far, huh? So if they're buses from here, who would be coordinating that into the U.S. Capitol Police's jurisdiction zone? And who would be coordinating, synchronizing, and deconflicting U.S. Capitol Police patrols on this street, 3rd Street, just outside of FBI's Washington field office? Huh, America? Do you know the answer to that? Well, I suspect it would be someone by the name of, at the time, Yogananda Pittman. Why? Because she was the head of Intel and Interagency Coordination Division. See how that works, America? See how that works? So, let's see what we have here. Remember the initial release of video of the pipe bomber? Saw this. We talked about this on Saturday, but the video we played on Saturday was the newer one that Dan Bongino shared from the Washington field office, right? the beloved, renowned FBI Washington fake office that is investigating the Fedsurrection, coordinated by U.S. Capitol Police Intel and Interagency Coordination Division. Yogi Pittman, allegedly. Everything's so allegedly. It's allegedly squared. Okay? Isn't that special, folks? So U.S. Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police Department have concurrent jurisdiction known as Extended Jurisdiction Zone of U.S. Capitol is here. And then the FBI field office is right here in this little segment, right along this line. I'm just showing context. I'm not telling you anything as far as analysis. I'm just laying things out for you. Just things to look at. And then what happens after January 6th, by the way, with this lady? Let's move this slide right here. We'll talk about her after the Fedsurrection. So let's take a look and listen. While everyone was focused on the media information that was being put out by John Brennan over at CNN, by Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe over at MSNBC. John Brennan over at MSNBC and CNN, James Comey over at CNN, and Paul Ryan was pushing out of what was going on the outside of the Capitol. No one bothered to talk about what was going on inside of the Capitol. And I want to play this again. Listen closely how they maneuvered the coup.
Let us remind that each side, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, each have 11 members allowed to be present on the floor. Others may be in the gallery. This is at the guidance of the tending physician and the sergeants at arms. Let's go. Let's just start. Okay.
Madam Speaker, members of Congress, for what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Point of order, parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Vice President. In order to follow with the Speaker's instructions that only a limited number of people be on the floor, may I ask how one would make an objection or make a parliamentary inquiry in the future if you're not on the floor but in the gallery?
Under Section 18 of Title III of the United States Code, debate is not permitted in the joint session. Gentleman's recognized.
I'm not attempting to debate. I'm trying to find out how a parliamentary inquiry or a parliamentary point of order would be made in following with the Speaker's request that most of us not be on the floor. How do you make one of those points of order when you don't know what's going to happen later?
Respectfully, the gentleman's parliamentary inquiry constitutes debate, which is not permitted in the joint session under Section 18 of Title III, United States Code.
Well. There you have it again. Inside of the chambers, they basically decided. Mike Pence, Pelosi, her parliamentarian, her Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, the head of Intel and Interagency Coordination Division at U.S. Capitol Police, Yogananda Pittman, the General Counsel of the U.S. Capitol Police, Ted DeBias, General Milley, Ryan McCarthy, decided that due to optics, they wanted to run a Fedsurrection. Due to optics. Because the optics were going to, if they didn't run the Fedsurrection play, the optics would be as follows. Immediate convictions for those involved in the COVID op. Immediate convictions for those that provided cover for the origins of COVID. Immediate convictions for those that were involved in all of this, for the illegal election across the 39 states. Immediate convictions for providing cover for this Biden criminal syndicate laptop. Immediate convictions for the illegal 2020 election. Immediate convictions for not allowing for a proper adjudication of the illegal election. Immediate convictions for the Democrat electors that were transmitted from the contested states because they were illegitimate. Immediate convictions for the 51. Immediate convictions for Electoral Count Act violations and 12th Amendment later on. And then constitutional violation, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 here. But no, they proceeded to cover things up a little bit, right? So, what happens for those that helped Pelosi out with the Fed's direction? Well. Let's promote you to Acting Police Chief Yogananda Pittman so that you can work it. Okay? You can work it. But keep in mind, it was Nancy Pelosi, Sergeant at Arms, who was Paul Ryan, Sergeant at Arms. You think he's got dirt on both these guys? Both Nancy and Paul Ryan? And is that why Paul Ryan provides Paul Irving top cover from his perch at Faux News? And is that why Nancy provides him top cover for helping with the Fed's direction on platforms such as CNN and MSNBC through her friends John Brennan and Jim Comey? And why was Nancy Pelosi's daughter filming a documentary? And why was her son-in-law, meaning Alexandra Pelosi's husband, outside the day prior at the JW Marriott with John Sullivan, the alleged the inside breach team individual, breach team leader with Jade Sacker breaking in? Jade Sacker being a CNN journalist that rolled in with John Sullivan as he said, "Remember? I told you it was going to be good. It's epic." Because he was probably part of the pre-planning coordination, right? Allegedly. Doing a little documentary on the inside of the Capitol. Michael Voss. Was he the one communicating with these two? Ray Epps and John Sullivan on behalf of good old Nancy? I'd like to see his communications. I'd like to see Ray Epps' communications further. I'd like to see John Sullivan's communication. I'd like to see all three of this, and I'm wondering how much he was communicating with Nancy through his wife, who was right next to Nancy during the Fedsurrection. So on one side, you got your boy John Sullivan and Ray Epps and Michael Voss and Alexandra Pelosi. And on the other side, you have those that Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan and these guys want to start to frame to make sure that Trump doesn't come back into office. Because why? They don't want Trump coming back into office because guess what? The illegal election. The Fauci-funded lab incident will be exposed where lots of people made money off of, right? These CIA analysts are going to be exposed, and the 51 spies who lied. The Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the 39 states, the electors from the 6 states that were Democrat are going to be convicted. They had to stop all of this, folks. Okay? So let's keep moving. They had to go after and start to make and build the case against the Proud Boys, against the Oath Keepers. Guess what? Enrique wasn't even in D.C. Stewart wasn't even inside the Capitol.
How many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol? Can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
You don't know how many there were, or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions. If there were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any. You want to say that again, that you don't know that there were any?
I have no personal knowledge of this matter.
I know nothing. Nothing. By the way, that was in reference to Ray Epps, and yesterday you indicted him. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? On a misdemeanor. Meanwhile, you're sending grandmas to prison. You're putting people away for 20 years for merely filming. Some people weren't even there yet. You got the guy on video who's saying go into the Capitol.
We need to go into the Capitol.
He's directing people to the Capitol before the speech ends. He's at the site of the first breach. You've got all the goods on him. 10 videos, and it's an indictment for a misdemeanor? The American public isn't buying it.
The video that you're showing right now is something that has been out on Rumble. And I can tell you that from the information that we received from the Metropolitan Police Department, I can verify that this video is from a Metropolitan Police undercover officer. It appears that this officer is encouraging people to climb the scaffolding and go into the Capitol. It appears he's encouraging, he's definitely helping people climb the scaffolding, and he's telling them, go, go, go.
Feds, agents of the federal government, we're not just there, but we're also encouraging people to riot or go into the Capitol.
That's exactly right. Federal agents encouraged the violence that day.
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
I can't answer that.
Who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
Fed. Ms. Sandburn, was Ray Epps a Fed?
Sir, I cannot answer that question.
I know nothing.
They immediately recoiled when you asked any questions about January 6th. And that was a tip-off to me. I mean, I had no thought in my head as I watched this happen on television and in the subsequent weeks that U.S. law enforcement or military agencies had anything to do with it. That never crossed my mind. I never thought there was a false flag or anything like that. I'm not a conspiracist by temperament. I never thought that. And then I interviewed the chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, in an interview that was never aired on Fox, by the way. I was fired before it could air. I'm going to interview him again. But Stephen Sund was the totally non-political, worked for Nancy Pelosi. I mean, this was not some right-wing activist. He was the chief of the Capitol Police on January 6th. And he said, oh, yeah. That crowd was filled with federal agents. What? Yes. Well, he would know, of course, because he was in charge of security at the site.
The Capitol Police Chief says January 6th was a cover-up, and the pipe bomber still remains at large.
Mr. Olson, on January 6, 2021, did the Department of Justice or FBI have any plainclothes officers among the crowd at the Capitol?
Senator, I'm not aware of whether or not there were plainclothes officers in among the crowd at the Capitol on January 6th.
Did any plainclothes officers enter the Capitol on January 6th?
I don't know the answer to that, Senator.
I know nothing. Nothing.
Okay. That pretty much summarizes that, doesn't it? Now remember, Tucker just said in that little video, he interviewed Chief Stephen Sund. Well, why was he fired then? It's because, let me recap a few things. There's so much here. I've done so much investigating and research on this. Okay. So when Tucker was on Faux News still, and he interviews Chief Stephen Sund, the day he was supposed to air it, well, the day before he was going to air that is when Tucker got the call saying, you're fired. It's getting too close to the truth of January 6th. And what is that truth? Here's the connection. Paul Irving probably was in communication with Paul Ryan. The reason why I think that is that in the third January 6th hearing, okay, for the committee. I'm going to look this up. Hearing. That's when my name was mentioned, and I started looking into all this stuff. And during that, you had none other than, that's what CommieTube had. Sorry about that background noise. The CommieTube took over. But Paul Irving, in that testimony, or not in the testimony, but Mark Short testified, which was Mike Pence's chief of staff, that Paul Ryan called and basically said, don't let Trump, don't go with the Ivan Raiklin plan of doing, not the Pence card plan, but there's another plan. The other plan I mentioned on Saturday during the stream in my Rumble, you can look at it, was essentially voting on the objections by state delegation, triggering a contingent election, and thus guaranteeing a re-election. So Paul Ryan calls over to Mark Short. Mark Short conveys to the J6 committee that Mike Pence, you have no greater duty than to protect the country from a second Donald Trump term, something along those lines. You got to remember that Paul Ryan, if that's what Paul Ryan's saying to Mark Short, I wonder if he's communicating with Paul Irving, his previous sergeant at arms, right? It'd be interesting to find out whether or not that's the case. Because, let's face it, these two were speakers of the House, Paul Ryan and then Nancy Pelosi. And they had the same sergeant at arms. So it begs the question, now that Paul Ryan's on the board of Fox News, over here, was he the reason why Tucker was fired? Because he wants to protect Paul Ryan himself's role in the January 6th Fedsurrection. Huh? Let's listen in.
You've described this as an intelligence failure, but a failure is something that happens accidentally.
None of the intelligence that was coming up talking about the storming of the Capitol, killing members of Congress, or killing my police officers was ever discussed at the conference calls that I was on, at least.
That doesn't seem to make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense. I'm looking at my men and women having their asses handed to them, and my first thought was, fuck it, I will take whatever discipline there is.
Once things got out of control, for 71 minutes, Pelosi refused to allow you to bring in the National Guard. Why don't we have answers?
It doesn't seem like people really want to get to the bottom of it, and it gets worse from there. I had a conference call with the leaders of all the law enforcement. It was a call I coordinated. Not one person on that call talked about any concerns for the intelligence, the attack on the Capitol that we were seeing that was out there. That's what's scary.
This sounds like a setup to me. I'm sorry, it does.
New Jersey State Police beat DC National Guard to the Capitol.
Wait, cops drove from New Jersey before the National Guard could get from the Armory on Capitol Hill to the Capitol. Why isn't this story everywhere?
I have no idea.
Why isn't this story everywhere? Tucker, you know the answer to that. I'll tell you why. See this person right here? Nancy Pelosi? Okay. How much influence and leverage does she have over CNN and MSNBC? See this person right here? How much leverage and influence he has over Fox? Aren't those three platforms the main news disinformation purveyors? And oh, by the way, if you scroll back up here, how much influence do folks like this, John Brennan, have over the mainstream media, as they are the national security consultants spewing out garbage, toxins into the brains of Americans? Yeah. That's your answer, Mr. Carlson. And I got to commend you, Mr. Tucker Carlson, for having the courage to have Chief Sandan being fired for it and then bringing him back on to get the truth out. So mad respect to you for that. So now how they covered up the Fedsurrection. I think, let me pause here real quick and ask, while I play I'm going to play a commercial, and while I do that, I want to ask you, did I make my case on convicting everybody so far involved in the Pelosi Fedsurrection? Just please make a comment, and I'm going to play a commercial before we go into how they covered up so far the Fedsurrection. Ready to level up your game? AIM Controllers is where custom meets unbeatable value. And right now, it's the best deal of the year. We start with official Sony and Xbox controllers, fully compatible with console and PC. No functionality lost. Then you go wild with custom features, smart bumpers, paddles, grips, stick height, custom buttons, even design your own PS5 snap panels. And here's the part no one else is doing. Lifetime warranty on all modified parts. That's right, lifetime. What other company does that? Exactly. Normally, a fully loaded setup could run you $400, but during our one price promo, it's just $209, or for the Europeans out there, 182 euros. No matter how many features you add. Use code RUMBLE, RUMBLE, at checkout and lock it in. This is your sign. Go to AIMcontrollers.com and build the last controller you'll ever need. Okay. So here we go. Capitol Police Board manipulated the criminal referrals, CCTV footage before it went over to the DOJ. DOJ had bias. J6 cover-up committee had those 10 hearings to poison the jury pool. They covered up a murder by this guy. They covered up and tried to block Tarek Johnson from speaking. He spoke nonetheless. Jaden X, his brother, audio recording of Jaden X talking about his role. Let's listen.
It looks to me like a lot of the J6 stuff the stuff that happened on J6 was pre-conspired. There's evidence to believe that even Ashley Babbitt's death was part of an orchestrated plan. Do you think that's true?
I know that John pushed her through into the window when they got into the Capitol. I know that he had pushed her up to the front, and I know that he was quoted by I think it's like Sky News and a couple other media outlets to get sensational footage on January 6th. He had corresponded with CNN and MSNBC and a couple other news organizations, showing them the Discord servers that he was a part of that were basically, and I know that people say they don't exist, but like Antifa Discord servers where they were planning January 6th. John was also part of Discord servers in Kenosha and in Minneapolis, where Antifa would go in and they would basically take advantage of the emotional state of Black Lives Matter and then ignite a riot. And their ultimate goal was to show that the republic that we're living under was not enough to keep peace, and we needed socialism. So their goal was to show that our republic is weak. And John had done that all summer long. And then when he did it at January 6th at the Capitol, no one bats an eye. We have him on video literally saying that he's going to, literally be saying, I have a knife. There's other videos of him passing out, long metal rods to different J6ers there.
Did you just hear that? I did. Okay, so there's so much to go through. You heard the video of Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. They violated quorum. Even the scum, this guy's right here, the Atlantic, wrote something. Mike Pence owes the country an explanation. Yeah, he owes the country more than an explanation of why he participated in the coup. The cover-up. I already talked about one of the 51 spies who lied. I use the term 60 because there are 9. We can say 51, whatever. Former Inspector General for John Brennan was the guy that ran this J6 Select Committee. He has control over everything, right? In terms of the choreographed 10 hearings that took place for the J6 Select Committee. All he was there to do, like his task and purpose and role and mission, this guy David Buckley, was to provide cover to get Trump to never return into office so that he couldn't come back and expose the 2020 election steal, the Biden criminal syndicate, the COVID con, the intel officers that manipulated the COVID con, all the electoral shenanigans. And this goes all the way back to 2014 and the Biden criminal syndicate with the Burisma deals. That's why they did everything they could, and then they did everything they could with the key people that they needed to be able to provide the cover up. Okay? And so I think that's about all I'm going to say, and we'll close with this. When you look at all the transcripts in case you search my name, you can see how much they're looking into me and asking about me. They're asking Mern, General Flynn, Rudy Giuliani. They're asking Mark Short about me, I think. Ivanka Trump. Many others. Okay? So now, I'm going to go into the second part of the title of this, which is why there are still no pardons for 8 Oath Keepers, 4 Proud Boys, Shane Lamond, Dan Wilson, and others, Tina Peters. The reason why there are still no pardons for them, even though President Trump promised them, it's because this guy's network that are at the DOJ, they don't want the pardons because then his little insurrection narrative that he created with Pelosi collapses. This guy, same thing, Mark Zuckerberg. These 51 that have influence over folks within the DOJ and the White House are trying to ensure that the pardons don't happen so that they can continue their narrative, or at least have some semblance of it. Folks like this lady, Pelosi, don't want a pardon, so her network of people at the DOJ do not want the pardons for Proud Boys and Oath Keepers because it debunks the entire narrative. Guys like him that have people in the DOJ and him. But I would say the most influential person is this guy's network in the White House and at the DOJ. His surrogates and affiliates, Mikey Pence's, are the ones behind making sure that Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Tina Peters, etc., Shane Lamond. For Shane Lamond, I suspect that Bowser and Pelosi do not want Shane Lamond, the former head of intel at Metropolitan Police Department, to be able to speak before this committee. Because why? Because then that means if he does speak and if he's out of jail, he's going to be able to expose all the things that happened at U.S. Capitol Police under her leadership and all the shenanigans and all the names. Between him, Tarek Johnson, and Chief Sund, they will expose the entire op. Okay? So there you have it. the Nancy Pelosi Fedsurrection and why you don't have pardons for 8 Oath Keepers that were nonviolent, 4 Proud Boys, 1 Shane Lamond, 1 Tina Peters, and 1 Dan Wilson. With that, I'm going to take one question or two. So let's go to the live chat. What are your questions? While I try to take questions, I'm going to see if I can refresh this to see if you can see me. It might close down the video and the whole stream, but I got to try it. Okay, I'm back. So what are your questions? I think I'm back. Let me just double check. There we go. So I saw somebody ask me, why does Trump have such a thing for Thomas Massie? I think it's not only President Trump, it's the people that are around him advising him on who to endorse and who not to endorse. I think at the end of my analysis, it comes down to at least 3 things. Thomas Massie was the only one that had the courage, the foresight, in order to, let me show you this. Let me share the screen. Remember, Thomas Massie, remember when they closed things down? March of 2020, and they were going to do the COVID relief package? He was the only member of the House that said, we need to vote in person for this steal of funds known as COVID relief package. It basically was saying, hey, I want to put on record those that are supporting the COVID op, led by Mike Pence and Jared Kushner and Deborah Birx and Mike and wait, why is it Mike Fauci? That's not right. Anthony Fauci. Sorry about that, folks. Anthony Fauci. Must have been a typo there. Anthony Fauci. Okay. Exposes all of them. That's strike 1 for Thomas Massie, would be my guess. Strike 2 for Thomas Massie is, you saw the video earlier. He's the one later on down here that exposes what? The good old, he's the one really digging into the pipe bombs, right? So it begs the question, is it because he's getting too close to exposing the pipe bombs? I don't know. The other thing is, Thomas Massie did not take the DNA mutilation injection nor the heart exploding myocarditis making jab. So that's another reason. The other reason is that he does not take any money from, he doesn't have an APAC handler, okay? So which begs the question, who ordered Pam Bondi to stop looking into Epstein? Like, who does she work for? So there's the White House, right? Then it begs the question, who in the White House told her to stop with releasing the Epstein stuff? Who told Cash to stop the Epstein stuff? Who told Dan to stop on the Epstein stuff? That's the way it looked like to me. That could be why. I don't know, but those are the things that pop out to me. All right. What else we got? All right. Let me go back to Massey is one of the only constitutionalists in Congress. Would Whitaker be a better AG right now than Bondi? Would Whitaker be a better AG than Bondi? I had an interview with Matt Gaetz on his show a couple months ago. We had this discussion. My answer to all of this is who would be in the best position to be at the DOJ and the FBI? Everybody in those two organizations has to be at a minimum unjabbed or vaccine injured. Minimum, okay? Meaning at the highest levels, you got to have whistleblowers. You got to have unjabbed at the senior executive service, and then those that are vax injured. Everyone else, they're poison. They're poison to the constitutional republic. At a minimum, they're uncritical thinkers that still haven't woken up to reality. Okay, let me see these questions here. Do we have a sense of how large the various factions within the DOJ are by influence, by percentage? At the very top, I mean, we know who they are, and those that are at the higher levels and mid levels that their names are never mentioned are the ones that really are running and slow rolling things. So that's who you got to look into, and that's who I'll be looking into as we move forward at the DOJ as well as the Washington field office. Is all of your effort here, Ivan, is all of your review out for phase 2 DOJ, or are you still out in the cold? No, I mean, am I still out in the cold? I wouldn't say I'm out in the cold. I have the answer sheet, right? And if you don't like it that I'm telling you that, then okay, great. That's not my problem, I guess. My duty is to report, right? And so see something, say something. I've done a lot of the analysis. I've done the research. And if this government wants to support my efforts in getting to the truth, they can call me. I'm not here to support their efforts because they've already proven that they're incompetent, incapable, or complicit. So if they want to support getting to the truth, then I'm available for that. But I'm not in a position to compromise, bend a knee. They're going to have to compromise to my 100%. Okay. That's just how things work. Okay. So that's all I've got for this broadcast. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm going to try to do these more often. If you like what I put out, obviously it's quite a bit of effort, time, etc. You can support here on Rumble. I think you can donate. I got a couple donations last time. That's welcome. Where else? If you're all about getting COVID accountability, then please support my effort in a lawsuit that I'm in with the author of the vaccine mandate implementation memo in the Department of Defense that this May was ruled as the implementation of the vaccine mandate in the DoD was ruled to be unlawful. So if you want to help in that lawsuit, you can donate at, I'm going to type it in here, givesendgo.com/Terry Dirham. That's the lawsuit of who I'm with. I'm going to post it in here. There. You can help support there. And you can subscribe on Substack. You can subscribe on X. That definitely allows me to do what I do. So I think that's it. Good times. enjoy your day.